Hey guys, what's that?
Breaking news, Jaylen Brown has been traded for a bag of chips. Boston will send away a franchise player and finals MVP beloved by the whole city. But as mentioned, they will be receiving a bag of chips.
So news of the week. Last week, Jaylen Brown traded to Philadelphia. I was shocked. I was really upset in the moment, actually. I probably thought what everybody else thought. What is this? It wasn't chips, it was Paul George. But we'll get into the Paul George piece of it in a minute. But before this trade, guys, I was thinking like, I kind of thought the Celtics were going to keep him. I know that they went for Giannis, and Giannis got traded to the Heat, and then they were pivoting, like still looking to trade him, feeling like the chemistry wasn't quite there from the stuff that he said on the stream. And I just kind of feel like they should keep him because a lot of the packages that were being talked about at the time, which was like Evan Mobley in Cleveland, there's a little bit for Rudy Gobert in Minnesota. We have a need at center. Even the package to Portland centered around Donovan Clingan. And like with each of these scenarios, we'd get like I was thinking we'd get Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and picks if we went to Minnesota, which maybe looks a little bit delusional now. Maybe it would just be Gobert and picks. With Cleveland, Evan Mobley, and maybe another player and a couple draft picks. But these are the types of packages we were looking at. A young Donovan Clingan with Shaden Sharp and multiple first round picks. There were reports the Celtics were looking for 4 first round picks. So that's kind of where my expectations were. And I just thought, even those types of trades, like it feels like a step back. It feels like we're getting a little bit of a lesser player in Clingan, or Rudy Gobert or Mobley, but it feels like we're getting a little bit lesser of a player and picks, which like we're trying to compete for a championship right now. So I just didn't really understand, why we get rid of one of the core pieces that makes us a championship contender in exchange for like being a little bit worse in draft picks. Like if you made it the center fit, I kind of understood a little bit more combined with the chemistry issues with Tatum and Brown and the things that Brown's been saying on stream. But ultimately, I didn't really want to do it. I wanted to run it back. And so you could imagine my and everybody else who's been following the situation shock when you get back basically nothing. When you consider the fact that in order for the 76ers to get off of Paul George's contract, they would have had to trade him and at least a first round pick, potentially 2, just to get his contract off of their books. He's making more than $50 million, Paul George is, for 2 more years. Second year is a player option. And he's 36 years old and not in his prime anymore. He averaged 17 points a game last year for Philadelphia. Had a good playoff series against Boston, but just nowhere near the type of player that you would expect in a trade for Jaylen Brown. Because now it's like, well, they would have had to attach a pick or 2 anyways, just to offload Paul George's contract. What value did the Celtics get back for Brown? And the answer is none. They got back no value, and I was floored. I thought I wanted to compete for a championship with Brown again this year. I was on an earlier episode. I was calling out for Brown to like address the fact that he wants to play with Tatum. That may or may not have been the case. Reports were that Brown didn't want to get traded at all, and this was all the Celtics wanting to get rid of him. So why did it happen? I think as a fan, you can just kind of be floored by this, and just to do this to your fan base, to get rid of the franchise cornerstone that won a championship for you. There has to be something else. There has to be. I was roughly aware of the analytic argument against Jaylen Brown. There was that report put out by Bobby Marks where some people were saying he was the 7th best player on an NBA team, let alone in the whole league, because the analytics don't like him. And I want to get into those details a little bit because I just super disappointed as a Celtics fan to lose this player that's meant so much to our team. He has 3 years left on his contract, so I want to get into a few things. First, we can talk about the money of it. Let's talk about the money first. So both players are actually making a similar amount of money. Paul George is slightly cheaper. He waived his trade kicker, so he's just a couple million less per year than Jaylen Brown. They're both over 50 though, and and Paul George's contract is 2 years, Jaylen Brown's is 3 years. Now I know that's only 1 year difference, but this is Brad Stevens like to use the word optionality. This does increase optionality. Jaylen Brown's contract extension was up to be extended this July, this month, and so he would have expected that from Boston. It would have burned a bridge a little bit for Boston to not give it to him, especially when he feels like they would give it to Tatum. So if they were going to go the route of not extending him, then they probably would have had to trade him. You might look at a situation where he would really want to be traded and make things difficult, like we've seen stars do in the past, if that were to be the case. So looking at that, it's not 2 years versus 3 years. It's really 2 years of Paul George versus indefinite kind of 7 years, 6 or 7 years of Jaylen Brown on a max contract, and that's what the Celtics didn't want to lock themselves into. So that's one piece of it. The next piece of it that's really been criticized is the timing of it. A lot of people saying this deal would have been available in September. This deal would have been available in October. Um, I think so. I think so, but I understand why they did it now. They didn't want this hanging over them all summer. In addition to that, if it got to the point where they didn't offer Jaylen Brown the extension, you can see a point where it becomes more clear that he really needs to be traded, and the desperation from Boston goes up. And believe it or not, I think his value actually could go down. I don't think it's a guarantee that this would be here in October, which is for nothing. Because I think a lot of people around the NBA view Jaylen Brown's contract as a net negative contract that would also need assets attached to it in order to get rid of it. It sounds crazy and harsh for an NBA superstar to be talked about like that, especially Finals MVP, someone in the MVP conversation last year, like Jaylen Brown. But I think a lot of people just say he has bad on-off numbers. So bad, the team plays better when he's off the court than when he's on the court. And I want to look at those numbers a little bit. We have here a chart from cleaningtheglass.com that breaks down some detailed on-off numbers for this one is for Jaylen Brown across his 10 years in Boston. So this gets into detail across offensive and defensive statistics. The overall on-off number for the season is going to be the very left number here. And these boxes that are shaded orange or blue give a percentile. So basically orange is good and blue is bad. Orange is one of the better performers compared to your peers, and blue is towards the bottom. So a lot of blue here. I mean, the overall story, you just look at it, 2 of the last 8 years, Jaylen Brown's had a positive on and off number, plus 5.8 and plus 1.1, and that was in 2021 and 2022. He's had 4 consecutive years of his team performing better when he's on the bench than when he's on the court. It's been a pattern for him. It was true in the playoffs. It's been true in the playoffs. It's kind of staggering. He's not even close. This isn't the case for any other superstars. I mean, just like a lot of blue on defense that this year. So I just, a lot of people see this and they want to understand, how is it possible that for a guy in the MVP conversation, that his team performs better when he's on the bench than when he plays. I mean, if you think that you make your team better, it's just hard to come up with a reason why that would make any sense. The Jaylen Brown takes a lot of shots. He doesn't have a particularly high field goal percentage. His assist to turnover ratio is not very good. He gets a lot of live ball turnovers, meaning that the defense strips him while he's dribbling, and it leads to transition high percentage points for the other team. There's a lot of things where you just think, like, he scores a lot, but he scores a lot inefficiently, and maybe he's just not as good as his volume would indicate. When you look at these numbers, it seems shocking because the eye test disagrees strongly. People's perception of him is not that, and the Celtics have trusted him enough to play him so much in all these games, and it seems to have worked in some capacity. It worked to the extent that he won a Finals MVP with the Celtics. So there's some there, but combined with his contract, if you look at these kind of hesitations, they can say maybe the team could stay afloat without him. Even this year, by the way, even this past year without Tatum for most of the season, he had a negative 5.6 on off number, meaning like the team went 9-2 when Jaylen Brown didn't play, like no Brown and no Tatum. They went 9-2 against the rest of the NBA. So like maybe the Celtics are just a good deep regular season team, and maybe Brown is a good player, but not good at being a number one option on a team, which is something that he felt like he proved this year and probably did to a lot of people. I love Jaylen Brown. I'm going to root for him for the rest of his career, but you look at some of these numbers and you think maybe the Celtics would have been a good regular season team if he didn't play at all. This is a large sample size at this point, and it gets kind of overwhelming to look at all this and think nothing of it. I get not fully buying fully into it and thinking that it tells the whole picture. It probably doesn't. You still feel like Brown's going to give you a good chance to win in the clutch. You feel like he can score. He's a good tough shot maker. He's made some tough shots for us over his years in Boston, but the defense seems to perform worse, even though he's known to be a good on-ball defender. This is years of this being the case, and a lot of blue. And one of the criticisms of this type of stat is like, well, the Celtics are really deep, and the Celtics have a really good bench. And so when he's off the court, our bench is really good, and the bench of the opposing team stinks or is average or whatever. And so the Celtics bench just crushes the other benches, and so uh, Brown's plus minus while he plays has to compete with a really good plus minus of the Celtics bench, which like okay, that makes sense. I can see that having a large factor. If you look at the plus minus or on off numbers for teams with good benches, of course you're going to see that the on off splits are generally better for teams with worse benches. So Celtics have a good bench. You give Brown a little bit of a cushion there, but his teammate Jason Tatum, and this is the problem. I'm going to pull up his on-off chart for his tenure in Boston right now, and as you can see, it's a lot of orange, a lot of deep orange. He's had a positive on-off in every single year but 1 year of his career. Ironically, it was their championship season. But some pretty amazing analytical numbers despite the strong bench performance of the Celtics. And you just have to wonder, like, if that's going to be the excuse for Brown, then wouldn't you also see that be the case for Tatum? And you just don't on offense and defense and everything in between. The Celtics play better when Tatum's on the floor, and that just wasn't true for Brown. So when you look at it like that, and you consider the fact that we're getting Paul George back, so you look at this picture and you think maybe the Celtics, just by not having Brown on their team, would be better, would just play better by a Tatum-led, analytically driven basketball team without Jaylen Brown. So when you look at it from that lens, and it's like you're getting that off the books, it seems like a risk. It doesn't pass the eye test, but analytically, it feels plausible that the Celtics could be about as good as they are just by subtracting Jaylen Brown from the team. And then obviously you shed his $60 million contract that goes with it. You get back Paul George, who does fill that contract space, but for significantly less time, 2 years compared to, as I said, the 6 or 7 years of Jaylen Brown on the max contract. And then you look at Paul George over his career and his on-off stats, also very favorable. You generally see favorable on-off stats for superstars, especially on defense. You look at all the orange numbers. I mean, his total on-off, that left column every year, he's been an analytical superstar his entire career, including these 2 seasons he's had with Philadelphia. And he did play very well in the series against the Celtics this past year, so he probably has a little bit left in the tank. But when you stop thinking of it in the context of Paul George replacing a superstar and more in the context of he's a guy who can probably help our team win, and Jaylen Brown, even though the conventionally considered better player these last several years, has arguably not done that. And so when you really let that sink in, consider the optionality of the contracts. I know this feels like coping, guys. I know it sounds like, well, is it really? But obviously, with the eye test, most people just still feel like, yeah, the Celtics messed up. They're going to want that one back. What were they thinking? And I get it, but I just want to explain the vision here because the more time that goes on since the trade, the more at peace with it I feel. It seems crazy to say, but my expectations are just as high as they were before this trade. I think, I have a little bit of trust that the front office knows what they're doing. That they've looked at this. This is a large sample size at this point, and maybe they're taking a little bit of a leap of faith in that. I know there's a debate on how influential analytics should be in these front office decisions, and we'll see if they're right. But as a fan, my expectations are just as high. I'm not viewing Paul George as a replacement for Jaylen Brown. I'm viewing this as the front office thinking our team, like maybe Tatum and Brown's role is a little bit redundant, and Tatum does it better than Brown. And Paul George is a really good role player at this stage in his career who can add to the team and help us win games in a system that the office felt worked better without Brown already. Combined with getting rid of his max salary, they just felt like it was a good idea. We'll see, guys. This is what the analytics look like for Brown. Crazy as it is, Paul George might be a good thing coming back. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds like I'm just coping right now. I was at first, but I'm really starting to believe this stuff. I know the Celtics odds to win the title, to win the East, went down a little bit after the trade. I like it. I like their odds. Championship expectations this year yet again. This changes nothing to me. I know that it doesn't pass the eye test. It doesn't pass the court of public opinion. If it doesn't work out, people are really going to put this as a knock on the legacy of Brad Stevens. I say just give it some time. Give it some time. There's some math supporting it. I'm never going to stop loving Brown as a player, and I know it's hard to get behind, but just give the math a chance. Give Paul George a chance. I like the Mitchell Robinson signing. This is not a bad off season for the Celtics. This is obviously a pivotal off season for the Celtics, but I'm coming into next year looking to win another championship this year. Bring it on. Let's get it.